go ahead and start it. So last week I had you guys reading Byron. Did you like Byron?
It was okay.
You said that while you yawned.
I felt
okay. What does any of you? Do any of you have your copy?
This is a hard no. You can have
This it's. What did you say, Thomas?
Nothing. Me and Marta don't remember anything about it.
I kind of
Raymond was like,
it's okay.
Okay.
So,
Well, then that kind of tells us something. I bet you remember the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner.
No,
I didn't.
I don't.
I forgot to read
All I remember is
You didn't read it?
So,
Oh.
the reason why I don't remember reading the Byron or whatever his name is because I don't read my poems.
You should read them out loud. I told you over and over.
Not even in my room.
Okay. Well, since nobody remembers, we're just going to be subjected to Mrs. Ferguson reading them out loud. Okay. Remember the Romantic poets. So they're very concerned generally about individuals and about nature. And so the first one, She Walks in Beauty, is obviously an individual. I like this poem. I guess, about Byron, I feel kind of like he's okay. If you want to know the truth. He's okay. I kept confusing. I wanted to. She dwelt among untrodden ways. Like I kept wanting to call it She Walks in Beauty. Apparently, I find both of those just sort of. All right. Okay. She walks in beauty, like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes, thus mellowed to that tender light which heaven to gaudy day denies. Okay, so I was reading these again yesterday, and I was thinking about that. The beginning's very obvious. She walks in beauty, like, okay, she's pretty, got it. All that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes. And I just got to, that struck me, all that's best of dark and bright. And then it struck me that he's just talked about, and like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies. He's talked about night. He hasn't really talked about day yet. But what's good about dark? All that's best of dark and bright, because like the stars are bright and the sun is, but why would she need to have combined what's best, the dark and the bright?
Because you can't see the light unless there's like something darker behind it.
Okay, I like that. I suppose you can't see the stars at all unless it's dark. Because then he goes on and he says, so everything that's good about darkness and light is in her eyes and in her face. And then he says, thus mellowed to that tender light which heaven to gaudy day denies. So why does he think that the daylight is too bright? He says the light is mellowed to that tender light which heaven to gaudy day denies. Like the light of daytime is too bright and she needs it tempered with darkness. I don't know. I got to admit, I read this poem before and I was just like, yeah, she's pretty. And then I just tried to read it really slowly this time and I thought, wait a minute, what? Like, so day is too bright because it's not like, my love is like the sun and the brightest day. It was like, no, like the light needs to be tempered and mellowed somehow. Okay, what were you guys saying?
Wait, what did that mean? That
I was just
I would
saying
that's
something silly.
it just doesn't really think to me.
Well, you were just being silly.
Yeah.
You were just mocking Byron
No,
with his
I
two
was-
names and.
No, I was just like maybe her best feature was not being able to see it.
That could have been. Maybe she was blind. Maybe she was blind.
And then he says she's perfect because in the next stanza, whatever it is, the balance of light and dark is perfect because it says, one shade the more, one ray the less, had half impaired the nameless grace which waves in every raven tress. Now we're talking about her hair, or softly lightens o'er her face. So her face and her hair have a perfect combination of light and dark. Where thoughts serenely sweet express how pure, how dear their dwelling place. Do you want to check and see if that's your mother calling? There's a...
I bet it's going to be Chicago.
Chicago called us this morning. We didn't answer.
We got we got Washington D.C. and then Mom started getting so there's some really weird guy from Georgia calling her, and she was like, block you?
Yes. Okay. And on that cheek and o'er that brow, so soft, so calm, yet eloquent. And that makes me stop too. How is your cheek and brow eloquent? What does eloquent mean? What are you if you're eloquent?
You're good at talking.
You're good at talking. So her cheek and her brow are good at talking.
Very defined. She talks so much that her jaw is just super strong and super defined.
But have you ever, like some people are very expressive with their faces though, right? Like they speak with their faces.
Maybe she was deaf and blind. not deaf and blind. Yeah, maybe she was deaf and blind.
Wow.
So she
I think
speaks with
dumb.
her jaw.
I think dumb and blind.
Dumb is
probably
blind, whatever
dumb
way
is
you
blind.
want. And then she just spoke with her expressions.
This is almost as bad as, I'm sorry if Wednesday students are watching, but my Wednesday student that believes that I've already forgotten the name of it, the one I talked about, the one I said I just confused this one with. She's dwelt among untrodden ways. Is about a serial killer. Like he killed her. He killed her. That's why he knows where she is. He's the only one who knows where she is.
That could be too.
She's like,
Maybe you didn't have to.
it's a murder.
Murder mystery.
It's Agatha Christie poem.
Okay. So her face is eloquent in some way. The smiles that win, the tints that glow, but tell of days in goodness spent. A mind, and then I love this end, a mind at peace with all below, a heart whose love is innocent.
I don't know. It sounds like she's deaf, blind, and dumb. Her mind's
And
at
that's
peace.
what
She can't
makes
hear
her
anything.
absolutely perfect for
This-
him.
this-
She can't hear anything.
Is a much sadder poem than I ever realized.
It's the only explanation.
That's the only.
Wow.
Definitely.
Okay, so
Only
Maybe
I don't
she-
even want to know what you're going to make in the next one.
Yeah,
I like the next one. So we'll know.
We're going
By
to
the
do
way,
that for you.
we ought to be spending like a half hour on that poem, but we are just not.
Right.
And because we have Tale of Two Cities, and because I don't want anyone. Your faces will start to be eloquent, and they will not be saying good things. So we'll know. Okay, start over. So we'll go no more a roving, so late into the night, though the heart be still as loving, and the moon be still as bright. For the sword outwears its sheath, and the soul outwears the breast, and the heart must pause to breathe, and love itself have rest. Though the night was made for loving, and the day returns too soon, yet we'll go no more a roving by the light of the moon. What is this guy accustomed to do?
I don't know.
Make love at night?
Yeah, just roam at night. Just like hang out. Like he and his peeps just hang out at night. And they did, by the way. I told you, Byron and Shelley and this crew were just kind of some wild livers. So why do they not hang out at night anymore? As far as I can see. Let's see if you have a different idea. Why will they not go hang
Someone
out all
died?
night? What?
Someone died?
I don't know if someone died.
They got caught.
It
They
doesn't
got
say
caught hanging
that.
out.
He says, let me read the
Wow.
second stanza again. Oh, you say it, Thomas.
They're getting worn out.
I think they're getting worn out. For the sword outwears its sheath, and the soul wears out the breast, and the heart must pause to breathe, and love itself have rest. You can't party every night. I'm sorry, it's not good for you. You get tired. I'm not totally sure if there's anything more to this poem or not.
There's really not
Like,
much
we
to this
just can't stay up till 4 a.m. and close the bars down every night. We need a break. We're getting older. We'll go no more a roving. It's kind of sad though.
No.
Like that. Well, I mean, not the lack of partying, but the fact that time passes, and even though something's enjoyable, like time marches on, and you can't always live the same way, or like I can't eat a whole foot-long sub anymore,
I
and
can.
Why not?
see, because it makes me
I
sick.
did one time.
But once upon a time I could, and like my husband and I could eat a whole Little Caesar's pizza, and now we're up all night with heartburn. That's what this poem means to me. So we'll go no more to Subway and Pizza Hut by the light of the moon and eat it all
My
in one
dad can
sitting.
eat half a pizza. He peppers himself down.
There you go.
Sorry.
Okay, so I have two poems by Shelley for you. Percy Bysshe Shelley, or Biss. Sometimes I hear Bish and sometimes I hear Biss. I don't know. Maybe it's
How
like
did
a
they come up with that name?
I don't know.
It's
This is the best friend of Byron.
Is this Byron too?
No, Shelley.
Okay, so
Okay.
he's the
Shelley
guy,
sounds
right?
like a dog
Wait, he's
name
the
or
husband
something.
of Mary Shelley.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. This man's wife wrote Frankenstein when she was 18 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite the masterpiece.
Shelley,
Eyeball that is on.
after driving one woman to madness and suicide by jilting her, he ran off with Mary Shelley, and they weren't married yet, and she was 16. His wife was still living, by the way.
Oh.
But when she finally killed herself, he married. These people were
Wait, I'm
messed up.
confused.
They were
What happened?
like
What?
He insulted her until she suicide.
He jilted her. He left her,
Okay.
and he ran off with Mary,
Oh, okay, got it.
who was
Okay,
16.
that would
That's
make
why you gotta
me
watch
really
the
tick.
Yeah.
BBC
So,
Creation.
hey guys,
For what?
calm down.
I'm
Wow.
tired. I've had like 10 hours of sleep in the last 2 days. So.
Oh, I say last day. What are you talking about?
Really good. Like more than I have.
Okay, so I have two poems. One is called To a Skylark, which I feel like you're going to know is about a bird. But obviously, writing a poem just about a bird flying around is maybe not so interesting. So it's a long poem,
Yeah, it's about a bird.
okay, about a bird. So I want you to read it and think about.
You have to count each individual.
There are a lot of similes in this. All right, a lot of stanzas start with like. The skylark is like this. The skylark is like that. You have a paper. You could take notes. You could write what. Tell me all the things a skylark is like. What does the skylark remind him of? But this is not my favorite poem. Ozymandias is one of my favorite poems ever. This is one that I went ahead and memorized. I highly recommend memorization of Ozymandias if anyone's interested. And I think that, here, go ahead and send those around. I think that I have an extra here. Because I got things ready before I knew that Alondra and Adriana weren't going to be here. Meredith hands one at a time.
Helena handed me one, so I had to hand over.
Okay, so I'm going to read Ozymandias. You're going to read it again over and over, but because I can, I am.
Okay, wait.
And I'm sorry that I forgot to take off the highlighting of Ozymandias. It was just highlighted when I copied it. Thank you. Oh, we have a lot of them left over. Okay. It is a sonnet. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." So you tell me, what did this traveler from an antique land see?
Basically nothing.
Well,
Nothing but
we
ruins.
saw something.
I don't know.
What is this
The
thing that's being
ruins or something.
described? Okay, ruins. Ruins of what?
Ruins of
The
like a,
ship.
I wouldn't say ship. Like they're too, like maybe like a castle or something. That
Okay.
might be there.
Well, listen. Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. And then it says, near them a shattered visage. What is a visage?
Face.
A face.
Statue.
A statue.
Oh, I didn't think
There was a statue of someone in the desert. But is the statue in good condition?
Nope.
It is really not, because the legs are trunkless and the face is half broken off and laying in the sand. But the pedestal that the legs are standing on is still there. And this is what the pedestal says. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Would looking on this currently cause you to despair and be overawed by his power?
No.
Why not?
'Cause it's kind of tumbling.
Because it's all
Not
crumbled.
really
It's a mess.
anymore.
And then it says, nothing beside remains. What he said on the pedestal. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Look around you. Okay, there's nothing around me but sand. I picture this in Egypt. A lot of times people identify this Ozymandias as a statue of Ramses in Egypt. In the late 1700s and early 1800s, there was lots of Egyptian excavation starting to go on, and so that was kind of becoming a thing. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sand stretch far away. Every civilization that's ever been thought it was going to be forever. And every ruler that's ever ruled and been powerful thought it would be like this forever. And it doesn't last. It doesn't last. I don't know. I just love that poem. That idea that, you know what it reminds me of in Lord of the Rings when they are in, in Gondor, but across the river.
Oh.
You know, in Osgiliath.
Mm-hmm.
And there's statues, like there's
statue
old
of the king.
statues and there's heads and everything. Like, that was once a mighty kingdom in ages past, and now it is just ruins, and statues that were once of mighty rulers are now just, heads in the dirt. And anyway, that is the way of life and civilization, which is, I guess, a little depressing. But it's good to be reminded of it, right? Do you think we're better off if we just think everything is going to last this way forever, or if we have a healthy realization that everything changes? Which would you rather be?
The latter. I would rather.
You would not like to just be blissfully ignorant that things will change?
Wait, what?
What, you want to be
What?
neither?
Yeah, I went with neither.
I don't think you have a choice. I think
I
either
think
you
I
have to
do.
feel like everything's going to stay the same, or you feel like things might change. What would be the third option?
I feel
not
like,
care in the
yeah,
world.
I feel like I would like it. I guess it is good to have the realization, but like that's for later.
Okay. Like, there's some personage in the Bible. I'm pretty sure it's one of the rotten kings of Israel. There's a lot to choose from. And it was one of those moments when the prophet was announcing doom and destruction on it might have been Judah. It might have been late in Judah's history. Sorry, I do not. It's the king of Israel or Judah, and the prophet is pronouncing doom. But he said something like this, that he didn't care because, it will not come in my lifetime, or it will come in times after me. I'm like, dude, that's just terrible. Like, I don't care if it happens to my grandchildren. Buddy, that just doesn't seem nice at all.
Is that your phone?
Yes, it's my phone. Is my song pretty? I know that they just want me to check on my car warranty, and I'm just ignoring them.
Those are the worst, where they want you to. We get
Yes.
And they always guess the wrong car. Like, you have
Well,
to
they
do
don't
it.
even know. Like, ours
Silver
has
Rock,
not.
we're like, no.
Ours has
no.
never been in
I
warranty.
can't afford
Like, it's okay. So last week I gave you a document from Thomas Jefferson's journal talking about the fall of the Bastille, which we read about in Tale of Two Cities. And, excuse me, now I'll get the hiccups. The rise of rebellion and violence.
I left that at home.
That's okay. That's okay. I am. Just a second. I'm going to get my water because I'm hiccuping.
I'm not sure. I don't remember. I know it's this one.
Those are, maybe by the time I do this class 4 years from now, I will figure out how to temper the amount of stuff I give you and the speed at which we do things to have more time to talk about those. But for right now, I'm giving mostly to give you historical looks at the event that we're reading a novel about, in an optional way. Like if you don't end up reading them, it's okay. It's okay. But I just wanted to, some of them corroborate, they agree with the picture that Dickens is pointing of what's happening, a painting of what's happening in France. But I also told you that his isn't the complete story. He's crafting a story about people. Mm-hmm. He's not trying to give you a history of an event. So it just kind of fills it out, I think, these documents. So the last one, I think this is the last one I'm going to give you. Yeah, because we'll be finishing the book over Thanksgiving. Is an account of the king's execution. Of the king going to execution. Here, I will just, I think, Ruth, could you pass those around? I think you might end up with extra ready.
I'm doing it too.
An eyewitness account of the king heading to execution. Of course, remember, the English also executed their king. We have this two cities being painted, these two countries, England and France. England is also not guilty of having executed a king. Not with I was going to say not with such hatred, but there was hatred. Like there was anger at Charles I when they decided to execute him. He wasn't just the loser on the losing side of the Civil War. You know, they really felt like he was taking power that didn't belong to English kings. French kings had the power. We talked last week about Marie Antoinette and her little shepherdess cottage where she would dress up and be a little country girl with her friends and dance around in the countryside on public money, which eventually ticked the people off, obviously. That's an understatement, a vast understatement.
Shepherds off, the real shepherds.
She didn't even have sheep.
She did not have sheep. Nothing I know. I don't know if they provided her with sheep.
Okay.
It's a few token sheep, probably well bathed and scented with lavender and perfume or something. I don't know.
Bows in their hair, yeah.
I don't know.
Both in there.
Yeah, braided wool.
They sit with cuddly sheep cushions.
So the picture, obviously, Marie Antoinette did not come out very well, but that's not important. It is an awesome thing, an awful thing, and I mean that in its traditional sense, a thing full of awe, full of want to execute your own leader. And we impeach. We have a lot of people that hate Trump. We have a lot of people that hate Biden. We just have people hating on all over the place. But we don't, we don't kill them.
We don't like you.
We don't like you.
That's just pretty extreme.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I mean,
And mean, did you say?
no.
Oh.
I mean, like, our presidents have been assassinated before.
Yeah, this is true. This is true.
Yeah.
But it's
We know there are a lot of
one thing
people
to
like-
assassinate, and it's another to
Yeah.
to execute.
Yeah.
You know, like you might say, well, it's death no matter what. But what one person does of their own authority is different than what a society does. Because when the society does it, we all do it. You know what I mean? And when one person just grabs a gun and shoots somebody, they're not speaking for all of us. So definitely Thomas is right. I mean, it's not like we haven't had levels of hatred where people wanted someone dead, but we haven't, as a society, decided that's how we deal with people in government. You know, that when we change our government, that we need to kill the former, you know,
I have a feeling that
former administration.
Sit well with some people anyway.
Yeah.
Or with
No, especially the president, exactly. No, and we would hope it would not sit well with
He's
people.
like, oh yes.
So,
now I get that.
one thing I wanted to point out is that, you know, I gave you Jefferson's journal last week, and this was the week that they broke into the Bastille and let loose the 7 prisoners and captured more weapons and executed the guards. And they, you read about this in here. However, you know, in the section you read this week, Charles Darnay has gone back to France, and we'll go back and talk about this more in depth. And he's in prison, and he's there. Do you remember how long he's in the prison before they let him loose?
I can't remember. It's been more
Was it
than
3
a
years
year
and a
now.
half? Or
Yeah, it was,
a year?
and it was over a year.
Yeah, okay.
So over, I mean, I think that they say, but it was over a year. So everything, it's not happening just like that in 1 month. Like, oh, we stormed the Bastille and now everything is getting violent and now people are being guillotined left and right. It's happening over a period of time. And I told you that's, you know, historically accurate that you have these first people that take over. And yes, they did kill the guard in the Bastille. But it wasn't, we're loading people on carts and taking them in mass and guillotining hundreds of people a day. It wasn't like that at the beginning. You have 2 elements, and there's one that wants to just reform things. And for a while, the king was still the king, you know, and he's like, okay, I'll go along with this. You're right. We need change. But then the other group takes over, and they're very violent, and they're more like the Defarge, you know, faction. But it doesn't happen overnight. It takes some time. So I was thinking about how to start this off. And by the way, okay, so I think I asked you this. Marcia, have you read this book before?
Yes.
Okay,
I
please
guess that is
do
true.
not tell anything past what we've read, which is he's been set free, and he's been rearrested because he's been denounced by Madame and Monsieur Defarge and one other unknown person. Let that person remain unknown today, okay? And what's going to happen, let it remain quiet. But, so last year I was having you do those Lost Tools of Writing, and we were always asking, what should so-and-so have done something? Should Charles Darnay have gone back to France?
I'm going with no.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
He didn't know what would happen, but yeah, he should have gone
Because what was his motivation?
to help his servant, his faithful servant.
His favorite servant, Gabelle, who, remember, is the guy at Monsieur de Marquis, you know, who ran down the child and got murdered, and those townspeople, you know, they're coming after him. Was he a bad guy, Gabelle?
I don't know.
Because
Doesn't really talk about him much.
how did Charles know he was in trouble?
He sent a letter.
Okay, he sent a letter saying, they're accusing me of all this stuff, of extorting extra taxes and money from them and everything, and they've imprisoned me, but you need to speak up for me and say, I'm not what they're painting me out to be, that I've been on the side of the people. And I would look it up, but I don't think I have it marked, and it would take me forever to find it. But at one point he says, you know, they don't know. The people don't know that when they couldn't come up with the taxes from our region, I paid the rest out of my own money. That I forgave taxes to them because I knew how hard their lives were. So apparently he's not like the evil nobility. He did his best in a bad situation, I guess. You know, he's works for the Marquis. He's got to collect these taxes. He owes them to people higher than himself. But when the people just, As they say, you can't get blood out of a stone. I don't know why they say blood, but
Mine
just-
said like water or
I
something.
don't know.
Yeah,
Make
Well, I mean, Moses
Okay.
did, but I mean,
Yeah.
that's a different story.
It is a different story. It's a special case.
Maybe that's why they had to say blood.
Because you can get water out of a stone under certain circumstances. But you can't get what the people don't have, and he made up for that. So Helena's got a good point. He didn't know what was going to happen to him.
But it was his duty to go anyway.
It was his duty, and don't we feel like he seems characterized by doing his duty?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like it seems like he has a real solid conscience. I don't want any of that dirty, foul estate and money from my ancestors, from my dad and my uncle, because it's tainted, because they've, oppressed the people so hard. However, so we're mixed though. So Helena says he should go. So somebody says he shouldn't go. Somebody said he shouldn't have gone. Okay, why?
Because he was he was basically leaving his wife. And wait, did he have a kid or like?
Yes.
By that time?
Yes.
Yeah.
They had little
His son
Lucy.
died.
Yes, they had a son
Yeah.
that died apparently, but yeah, they had little Lucy.
And he's like, I'll be going to heaven or whatever.
I know.
Like,
It was.
oh, it made me so sad. It's like,
So Thomas, what is wrong with him leaving them?
I don't know. I feel like actually I don't remember the timestamp on it, but like they just had him, right? As a kid, or like.
No, she was several years old.
Yeah.
Because by the time they've been in France, she's like seven years old.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So she's
Well, then I guess that's okay. I thought.
Well, he should have told them and then left instead of just
Yeah.
sending
Okay.
them a letter.
Yeah.
I think we all maybe have a problem with him just leaving.
He jolted his wife.
But what would have happened if he had told her?
Then she would not let him go.
Yeah, she was like,
See,
She either would have come with him
yeah.
and gotten dragged into it herself, or she would have made him stay home, and then who knows what would have happened after
Yeah.
that.
Well,
Yeah.
Well,
I'm not sure if
he
he can
could have
make
still
him.
gone.
Yeah, he could have still
I
gone.
think
It's
the
not
wife
like
will-
she's like his god or
No,
something.
no. It's just like she
Like
would be
his
kind of
kid.
like she would be kind of a burden. She and the baby.
Well, I mean, he could still
Because
like
basically you have to
escape
make sure she
somehow
doesn't get
under
And
killed.
yeah,
cover of
she ends
night.
up there anyway.
I don't know.
She does, yeah.
So
But it's like
There's a lot of.
You know, it turned out better that she didn't
Yeah,
go, so
yeah.
it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
I guess it doesn't really matter.
honestly, I really can't stand her. She's so.
Okay, I like her. I really like
okay, okay, let's just stop. Let's stop and address this.
Lucy
Okay,
was-
so if it makes you feel better, Marta, a lot of people that read this find Lucy to be
Oh, wait. She's get like.
a little grating just because she's so good. Like she's not very interesting.
Yeah, she's kind of. I feel like she's like kind of how you expect the delicate English ladies and the BBC movies.
Okay,
the
yes.
typical
They're like, oh,
melodramatic.
Like, seriously, you're just like
The typical melodramatic English lady.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I mean, what is okay? So, what is her job? Okay, we're not. I guess I am talking about the plot, but I'm thinking, okay, I'm Dickens and I'm writing a novel and I need these characters and I'm going to have this. What's the good thing about having a character like Lucy? Like, what is her job in the story? I hate to say it like that because it makes it sound not very.
Making
Not-
everything
I don't-
okay.
Okay,
Silver
she
lining.
makes things okay, so she smooths over problems. What else does she do in the story?
She sees the silver lining. And she tries to see the silver lining in clouds.
she's optimistic.
Okay, she's
Yeah.
optimistic.
Too
Now-
optimistic.
She does have a big role with Sydney Carton, right? Sydney Carton's in love with her. So if she was less perfect, I don't know, would he love her from afar like he does? I don't know. I mean, I don't have an answer particularly that I'm fishing for. I'm just exploring why, because this is not the only book, the only novel written by a really great novelist that has kind of characters, you know. And then you think, okay, did the author not know they were, or did they have a purpose
Just
for
trying to bring
putting
contrast, maybe.
it? Maybe contrast. Now they did. There's a chapter called The Golden Thread, and they refer to her as the golden thread that holds all of them together. So if you think about it, think of all the characters. Like we have Stryver and Laurie and Dr. Manette and Charles Darnay and Sidney Carton. And the one thing they have in common is her. They sort of revolve around her. Like she's not particularly interesting, but all the action, in a sense, revolves. Not the action revolves around her. That's the wrong way to say it. It's the characters. The characters all have a pull, and she pulls on them and brings them into sort of an orbit with each other. Does that make sense? Kind of. So I'm going to see if I can find. I know the.
It's like one friend was like a friend with a few other friends, and other friends were friends with the other people.
But they all have that one
Miss
friend.
Ferguson, where does the third part end? I read the whole thing, so just because it was too exciting to leave and him in the prison.
Okay.
But
Okay. Don't say. So the third part, the part that we read, or the just book.
The part we just read.
I think. We read through chapter 7, right? A knock at the door. So when he's been set free, but he's not even out a day, and they knock on the door that night and they rearrest him. That's where we stopped for this week. So don't tell who is denouncing him and why he got. Okay, so I could have sworn there was a chapter called The Golden Thread, and I just dreamed that apparently.
I think the second part was, I don't know.
Oh, the whole second part is called The Golden Thread. Thank you. I'm not crazy. So this is interesting. It's even more interesting than if there was a chapter called that, because book the first is called Recalled to Life. Book the second is called The Golden Thread, and it explicitly says in one of those chapters that Lucy is the golden thread that ties them all together. So you have, I hate to make her just useful, but for the plot, that she brings all these characters together. Now we have to see what book the third is called, The Track of a Storm. Do you remember there was a night early in the first part that one evening they were there and there was a terrible storm? Yes, and they wonder if the storm is coming. Okay, so let me find some of the... Thomas noticed this last week, and I was going to mention it too. Do you remember when the wine cask broke?
Yes.
All right, and they were seething around it like the sea. And Thomas, I don't know if that was the scene or if it was another scene, but I remember you brought it up that they were compared to ocean waves and the ocean crashing, the mob around this cask. And later, this is when they are taking the Bastille. It says this: a white flag from within the fortress and a parley. This dimly perceptible through the raging storm, nothing audible in it. Suddenly the sea rose immeasurably wider and higher, and swept Defarge of the wine shop over the lowered drawbridge, past the massive stone outer walls, and in among the 8 great towers surrendered. So resistless was the force of the ocean bearing him on, that even to draw his breath or turn his head was as impracticable as if he had been struggling in the surf of the South Sea, until he was landed in the outer court of the Bastille. Is there literally any water here? It was the rush of people, the surging sea. But what is the sea like?
It's very unpredictable.
Okay, it's unpredictable. What is it potentially?
Rough.
Rough, destructive, deadly, and hard to hard to trace the path of, right? So is a mob.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is what I wanted to talk about for a while, though. So, Monsieur Gabelle After holding out for a while, climbing up, up to the like the roof, the battlements of his house, not palace or estate. He's not living that high, but he's not living poorly. He finally is getting swept away. But they come, and what happens to the Marquis's estate?
They burn.
They burn it down. And we have these enigmatic figures, 4 fierce figures from the northeast, south, and west. And they light it up, and then it says, 4 fierce figures trudged away, east, west, north, and south, along the night-enshrouded roads, guided by the beacon they had lighted, towards their next destination. The illuminated village had seized hold of the tocsin, the bell that you ring for alarm, and abolishing the lawful ringer, rang for joy. Not only that, but the village, light-headed with famine, fire, and bell ringing, and bethinking itself that Monsieur Gabelle had to do with the collection of rent and taxes, they go and attack him. Within 100 miles, in the light of other fires, there were other functionaries less fortunate, that night and other nights, whom the rising sun found hanging across once peaceful streets, where they had been born and bred. Also there were other villagers and townspeople less fortunate than the mender of roads and his fellows, upon whom the functionaries and soldiery turned with success, and whom they strung up in their turn. But the fierce figures were steadily wending east, west, north, and south, be that as it would, and whosoever hung, fire burned. The altitude of the gallows that would turn to water and quench it, no functionary by any stretch of mathematics was able to calculate successfully. So we've seen ocean. Now we've got fire. Do you think necessarily, do you think there are only 4 people lighting fire to things? Like one figure going north and one figure going west and east and south? Yeah. Why pick 4?
I guess it's in west, so it's more southern. So they're not necessarily like caught up into like a big commotion of other people.
Oh, okay. So
it's just like,
so it's clandestine,
we have, yeah.
Right?
So it's like we have these 4 people. We don't need anybody else. It's smaller. We're more likely to get away.
Okay. Oh, I like that.
Instead of like groups of people, like like with
yes.
like other mobs that we have today.
Yes.
It's more visible. Like they're not very undetected very much. So if you just have like 4 people causing anarchy, then it's less likely they're gonna be caught, and they can like get away with it. So.
This is true. This is true. What are you thinking, Marta?
Sorry, it's kind of like the California fires. A lot of people were actually setting things on fire. Like individual people were going and setting things on fire.
Yeah,
like
it's not a big.
My great aunt's county, I forgot which it was, but yeah, there was someone who actually was caught setting with matches and gas, and he's like, I'm just smoking what, matches. He didn't have any cigarettes on him. He's like,
yeah, my cousin and her husband, they were in Colorado for their honeymoon during the largest fire in history.
Yeah, nice.
So they was like, yeah.
So let's hold on to that, because I want to talk about that too in a minute, like the idea of fire. But there are 4 directions, right?
Yeah.
So we could have literally small bands of people for the reasons that Raymond said, but we can also have sort of symbolic in every direction.
Like
the 4 figures, like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. We've got the apocalypse coming on France, don't we? And the horsemen, the 4, are coming. So fire, setting fire to things. My daughter likes to set fire to things. Only things that she's supposed to set fire to, but she likes to make bonfires in the back, and if we have, like important papers that we burn that we don't want to just throw away, she's like, anything, I'll go set a fire. And we have a place for it, She doesn't just set things to fire, set fire to things. But, so tell me something about fire. What is fire, or what does it do?
It spreads.
Okay, fire spreads. Fire is hypnotizing. Tell me something. Fire destroys.
Keeps you warm.
Oh, I
Keeps you-
Forms.
It keeps you warm.
I guess it could be
It's pretty.
purifying in a way, I guess.
It purifies. We put things through fire to purify them. Metals. We melt them down and
It's really hungry.
it's
Get
hungry.
for more.
Does it discriminate what it burns?
No.
No.
It takes everything.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
if it's
it does.
unless it's not
Unless
flammable.
it's not flammable.
But
It's not
it doesn't
flammable.
seem to choose
I'm gonna.
consciously, you know.
Yeah.
It hurts.
Like a fire, I've heard them say, like tornadoes, this happens with tornadoes too, that a fire will
Oh, yeah.
sweep through, and often, like it might sweep through one side of the street, but unless the wind brings it, you know, some houses escape unharmed.
I have to hit them both equally. Both sides of the street equally.
Fire really
So
doesn't
down.
think that way, does it?
Fire's just kind of wherever the wind takes me, that's where I go.
So fire does all, I agree with everything. It's beautiful. It's mesmerizing. It's purifying. It's dangerous. It doesn't discriminate. What else in this book could be described in those terms?
I guess it fills people with like emotion and passion. Like seeing something burn is like, especially something you hate.
It's very
I guess
satisfying.
like it really,
Okay.
Very
it really like
satisfying.
incites the people, I guess.
Because the people, what if the fire and the people are connected somehow? Like mobs can be mesmerizing, right? People do things, so you get sucked into a mob. It can be warming, like you have camaraderie. What are they purifying? If fire purifies, are they purifying something?
France.
They're purifying France.
Or trying to.
They're trying to. But is fire controllable?
No.
Not very.
See, that's
Not
the problem with
easily.
fire. It's not easily, and it's very destructive. It comes at a great cost, you know? And it starts small. And like Marta said, you know, like you were talking about the fires in Colorado, we've seen what happens, you know, when it gets out of control. It's just amazing to me. Like one match, what?
One match,
You know?
one leaf.
And we've met a lot of matches already. We've met all these Jacques and the Defarges. Madame Defarge isn't a match. She's like
He's a torch.
TNT or something. Yes, yes.
He's a block of TNT waiting to go off.
Anyway, I just thought it was interesting. Like they're setting fire to things, and on a plot level, we see why. It's a symbol of oppression. I don't want to look at it anymore. I want to take it down. But you know, if
They
you
take
think
it
about
down
what
permanently.
fire does, and it does good things, and it does bad things. It does necessary things for us, but you've got to have respect for the destruction it can cause. And so I guess the question is, do you think the mob that we have portrayed here, I think the Defarges understand. But we're not going to talk about them because they're kind of ringleaders, right?
Yeah.
But we're talking about just the poor people that come into the wine shop. Just the people. The mender of roads. The guy he got strung up, but the guy whose child got killed. Do you think they understand all the ramifications of the fire they're setting? Like, do they know how to control it?
I don't think so.
I wouldn't say necessarily that they're like their intentions were to control it.
Mm.
Like I don't like if you're like if you're setting something that big and that type of scale, I don't think your intention is necessarily to
Okay.
control it. Or maybe in a way, it's like if you know if they were like a mob of people, then I could see they want to control the situation and control the people there. But if it's just 4 guys, I don't think they really want to control because they can.
I think
Well-
when they started, maybe they thought. I don't think when they started they were thinking the mass destruction they were gonna do in one night, but like everything it can get away from you.
They probably just
I
got
don't-
caught up in what they're doing.
Yeah, like we said,
Moms,
we should try it.
Okay. Thomas, you
mobs
say.
aren't supposed to, like in my mind, mobs aren't really supposed to be, they're not designed to control it. They're supposed to do it. And whoever's controlling the mobs is the one that's actually the one who's masterminding.
Okay, that's a good point. It kind of goes along with that scene we read about last week. We talked about the guy, the mender of roads, that came in and was talking with the Defarges. And remember, they showed him the nobility. They took him to see the king and queen and the nobles, and it's like they're obviously priming him to be a member of that mob.
They're testing him.
Like he is their tool. He is their weapon. He and all the thousands like him in the hands of the people that want to do the controlling. And they're planting these little, like landmines or bombs, and they're going to set them off at the proper time. Remember that conversation that when Mr. Defarge was kind of depressed because he felt like it wasn't happening fast enough, and she said, "But it will. But it's coming. We don't know when it's coming, and we don't know how long it's going to be, but we will have set the groundwork for it when it comes." And it came sooner, on the sooner side than the later side for them. But I like that description of Thomas's because it kind of makes them. I mean, does that absolve the mob for their actions then, do you feel like?
No. They still set fire
They
to a
just
building
don't
where
have
they have no
reason.
right to.
Yeah.
There's no reason in mobs.
I mean, they're being influenced, but they're not making them do anything.
No.
They freely chose to set fire to stuff.
Like, with the Defarges, like they filled the people with enough information about things. They filled the people with enough excitement so that they can actually be like an ocean, like taking over.
Yes.
So, yeah.
When fire, so say I'm the controller, and I've set fire. I've lit a fire under the mob and set them loose. What is the downside? And I'm thinking about this in a literal way. If you turn fire loose, what might happen?
You can't get it under control again.
You can't get it under control again, and what might get destroyed?
You.
Like, it might come back. I'm going to burn down, parts of Moline. Well, guess what? Maybe the wind shifts and it's my house that's on fire next. It comes back on you. When you light a fire and you light a force that you don't know how to control, it may come back to bite you. Yeah, Marta.
I feel there's also one proof with the French Revolution after, like, the post-revolution, that Robespierre and all of his minions, basically, like, they all, I guess they all turned on each other. They really did.
Yeah,
like, the fire
it came back
did.
to bite them.
Yeah, it really did, because when they realized, oh gosh, like,
what did we do?
Like, the people now are wanting to turn on us because they see what they've done. They see that we have, we've not been controlling them, but they've been kind of puppets for us to take over,
You could even say, like, today, like, different political groups, they have lost certain elections or seats because, it's the same party, but it's more of a, I guess, radical, and they try and push other agendas, but it's making the lesser look bad, and so they're churning on each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a split within the party, and then it just doesn't.
Yeah, because when you start going one direction, I feel like maybe the human tendency is to keep going.
Yeah.
We're not very balanced creatures, you know what I mean? Balance is hard, and yeah, well, just like Aristotle in his Ethics had this idea. We talk about the golden mean, the idea of being, like if you're take courage. If you're too far one direction, you're a coward. You don't want to risk anything. But if you're too far the other direction, you're foolhardy. You just throw it away. And courage is actually kind of a deliberate, thought out, weighing the risk. And I know there is danger, but yet I will go and face the danger. But I'm not just going to throw my life away stupidly. For those of you that read, Roland, like Roland, blow the horn. Like it's okay to blow the horn. But it's hard to stay, like that balance is hard. And so you get either revolutionaries or you get modern, anybody who's leaning politically one direction. And it could be both, both political parties. You start leaning one way, and it's very hard to bring it back to center, but it's like momentum just carries it off in one direction, because that fire, it just gets away from you. Yeah.
So I think back to Aristotle, like,
yes.
I think too, like courage is like deciding when admitting defeat is virtuous, because it might be, but like, let's say like you're going in, like the military, you're going in to siege some village, but then there are too many men who are, on their side, so you're like, but then like you might be like the leader of your platoon or whatever, and you think, before of thinking of yourself, you're thinking of the men in your platoon. You're like, okay, like, not only like if it were just me, I would go in, but since it's not just me, I need to be able to think this out clearly, and you will think, okay, is admitting defeat, backing out, surrendering, would that be better, since obviously the odds are against you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, save more lives than lose. Like, it's just like sometimes you have to weigh the odds like better and just use reason and morality.
And that's a good point, because as you finish the book, those of you who haven't finished it yet, I want you to kind of look at especially Madame Defarge in that light. There's a deliberateness where you can be balanced and decide what's worth the risk, and then there's a fanaticism that lights the fire and just doesn't care as long as stuff burns. Do you know what I mean? And I think you're going to meet a fanaticism there, and you're going to find out why you meet the fanaticism there. But mum's the word. Okay, so I love this description too. This is right after the part that I read. It's on the next page. Remember Monsignor? He's the guy who has to have 4 people feed him his cocoa. Monsignor as a class, so not any individual. We're talking about the collective religious nobility, had disassociated himself from the phenomenon of his not being appreciated, of his being so little wanted in France, as to incur considerable danger of receiving his dismissal from it and this life together. Like the fabled rustic who raised the devil with infinite pains, and was so terrified at the sight of him that he could ask the enemy no question, but immediately fled, so Monsignor, after boldly reading the Lord's Prayer backwards for a great number of years, and performing many other potent spells for compelling the evil one, no sooner beheld him in his terrors than he took to his noble heels. So what did Monsignor as a class do? How did he compel the evil one? Because it makes it sound like he's been conjuring the devil. Monsignor as a class has been conjuring the devil in France for years. What does he mean?
He's not living the life of the religious. Like I guess that could be like your inciting vice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And how has this had an effect on the people?
They see, okay, why is this religious man, like, why is he, instead of leading the flock, the church, he's, gaining wealth, and he has to have 4 people feed him chocolate in the morning. It's like, it kind of makes people like, what the heck? Like,
okay,
obviously the church is, the church doesn't care about it.
What is the clergy supposed to do? What's the famous injunction given to Peter? Feed my sheep. That's what we look to the clergy to do. The clergy is feeding themselves on the sheep's money. And anyway, I just loved that image, though, of reading the Lord's Prayer backwards for a number of years and conjuring up the devil, and oh my goodness, now he's here. And they all run off to where? Monsignor as a class? To England. They all take refuge in England, largely at Tellson's Bank, which is where they have shipped off. Did you get the idea that as things were going south, as things were going bad in France, they started transferring their money and holdings to England to get it out of France, to keep it safe, because they knew it was not good. And a letter, as we talked about, a letter comes for this Charles Evremond, Marquis, and he's like, I don't know who that is. What is the general opinion of everyone, all the French crowding around Tellson's, of this Marquis that nobody knows? Why is he such a bad person? Yeah, well, but his uncle's a bad, but they really condemn him.
Do
you know?
He got rid of all his property or something.
Okay.
He left all his titles or something.
He's an immigrant.
He left France.
He left France. Why is that? Why do they think that's so bad?
Unpatriotic, unloyal, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to see if I can find. Oh, I just never can find that exact place. Okay. Oh, Stryver, yes, was particularly nasty about. Okay. Just a second. Oh, here we go. Nephew, I believe, but in any case, degenerate successor of the polished Marquis who was murdered, said one. Happy to say I never knew him. A craven who abandoned his post, said another. This Monsignor had been got out of Paris, legs uppermost and half suffocated in a load of hay. Some years ago. Infected with new doctrines, said a third, eyeing the direction through his glass and passing. Set himself in opposition to the last Marquis, abandoned the estates when he inherited them, and left them to the ruffian herd. They will recompense him now, I hope, as he deserves. So he abandoned his estates, and who gets them now? That mob ocean, that ocean of mob, the mob ocean.
The ocean.
The motion.
The emotion ocean.
Yeah, he left, and of course, remember, all these people saying this have also left. The one guy who's condemning him smuggled himself out in a load of hay. Very, very undignified.
Very.
Yeah.
And when did they leave? I mean, what caused the people standing around and condemning him? Why did they ultimately leave France, do you think?
Before everything started.
Well, yeah, or because they were afraid. Yes, certainly there must be some level of fear involved in the reason they headed to England. Did Charles leave because of fear?
No.
He left years ago out of conscience, out of decision, not knowing that it was all going to go bad, but sensing it. Because remember when he went to dinner at his uncle's and he said, this place that looks so fine is crumbling mass of taxation and burden and, I don't remember the list of, things that he described it as.
Very colorful things to say.
Very colorful. Dang, I would never speak to any of my uncles like that.
Yeah. I had
That's
to
good.
get the "Are you perfectly
You also probably
sane"
don't have an
look.
uncle like the Monkees.
No,
I'm hoping not.
they're not.
If you do, you should probably just not speak to them at all. It could be dangerous. So they do, whether he should have gone or not, probably should have, well, I don't know. That's one of those unanswerable questions, should he have gone? But he did go. And he did go for good reasons. And he did go in complete ignorance of how very bad it was and how much danger. Did he think he was in danger?
No.
No. He's like, you know what? I was good to the people. they will see that I renounced everything. I never oppressed anyone. That ocean, it will be reasonable. And he doesn't realize that the ocean and the fire are not reasonable.
They're just gonna burn him up.
Yeah. He's one of a class, right? He is a noble. Yeah. The end. That's all we need to know.
He's a noble. Guillotine him.
Yeah.
Get him out of here.
Not quite yet. But so you remember, we already talked about it today, the scene where they're all lapping up the wine and they're all stained red. We get another scene. Dr. Manette and Pross and Lucy and little Lucy end up there. Jerry Cruncher's already there because he's traveled with Mr. Laurie and he's, kind of in his service. And they want to look out the window and Laurie says, don't. And they put Lucy in another room so that they can discuss things. But he looks out, Dr. Manette looks out, and here's what he sees. The grindstone had a double handle, and turning at it madly were two faces, whose faces, as their long hair flapped back when the whirligigs of the grindstone brought their faces up, were more horrible and cruel than the visages of the wildest savages in their most barbarous disguise. As these ruffians turned and turned, their matted locks now flung forward over their eyes, now flung backward over their necks, some women held wine to their mouths that they might drink, and what with dropping blood, and what with dropping wine, and what with the stream of sparks struck out of the stone, all their wicked atmosphere seemed gore and fire. The eye could not detect one creature in the group free from the smear of blood. Shouldering one another to get next at the sharpening stone were men stripped to the waist, with the stain all over their limbs and bodies. Men in all sorts of rags, with the stain upon those rags. Men devilishly set off in spoils of women's lace and silk and ribbon, with the stain dyeing those trifles through and through. Hatchets, knives, bayonets, swords, all brought to be sharpened, were all red with it. Some of the hacked swords were tied to the wrists of those who carried them with strips of linen and fragments of dress, ligatures various in kind, but all deep of the one color. We got a new party. It was fun when we were just sopping up the wine because the cask broke. We got a new party. And Mr. Laurie whispers to him, they are murdering the prisoners. They're just hacking them all to death. And Charles is there.
I can see why they would put Lucy out of the room.
Yeah,
Oh, here's another. I got to read this other. It's another deluge. Yes.
Yeah.
It's another ocean. We have another ocean.
From distress at that trial of Darnay.
Yes.
Earlier in the book, and she would die if she saw that.
Yeah.
Okay, let me read these two awesome quotes that I because they're just awesome, and I have no other reason to read them, but they're awesome. And then let's talk about strength and weakness for a minute. Okay, so I loved this. It's another ocean metaphor. The doctor is trying to get him freed, okay, during this year or more. And it says, what private solicitude could rear itself against the deluge of the year one of liberty, the deluge rising from below, not falling from above, and the windows of heaven shut, not opened. In the flood, it says the great deep was, the floodgates of the deep were open and the windows of heaven were open. The windows of heaven are shut and the deluge is rising from below. And then I loved these two. This is describing the guillotine. It was the popular theme for Jess. It was the best cure for headache. It infallibly prevented the hair from turning gray. It imparted a peculiar delicacy to the complexion. It was the national razor, which shaved close. Who kissed la guillotine, looked through the little window and sneezed into the sack. It was the sign of the regeneration of the human race. It superseded the cross. Models of it were worn on breasts from which the cross was discarded, and it was bowed down to and believed in, where the cross was denied. This is true.
I just like the image of like the deity goes, achoo!
And sneezing out ahead.
That's horrid.
Oh. And then they tell you the executioner who works the guillotine, it says, it doesn't tell you his name, but it says the name of the strong man of old scripture had descended to the chief functionary who worked it. Samson. So armed, he was stronger than his namesake and blinder, and tore away the gates of God's own temple every day. What does that mean? When did Samson tear gates away?
When he died.
Well, he knocked down a temple when he died. He also, at one point, he ripped the gates out. Okay, gates to escape. How does this Samson tear down temples and tear away gates?
Did he take lives?
Okay, and why? What does that have to do with temples?
Because
Did he
our
open
bodies
the
are
gates
temples.
to death or whatever?
Our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit.
Temple of the Holy Spirit. He tears away the gates of God's own temple every day. Blindly, like poor Samson who was blinded.
So we just, except for people, they just kill people all the time.
They just
He just stands there and just
Yeah.
guillotines one person after another
Yeah.
because they're sent to him.
It's like,
Get a hanky.
next!
Make some NyQuil. Antihistamine. Okay, so let me read my last two. Let me read my last two things that I marked here, but then I want to talk about, because you talked about her fainting, and I want to go back to that. Don't let me forget. But did you notice? So Lucy has a window where sometimes he's able to see her, not all the time. And there's a wood cutter there, a wood sawyer. Who is he?
He's the mender of roads.
He's the mender of road. Did you guys catch that?
No.
There's this one line, and so I marked it. It says, the wood sawyer, who was a little man with a redundancy of gesture, he had once been a mender of roads, cast a glance at the prison, and is basically spying on her. He's moved into Paris. He's the mender of roads. And
Who's the mender of roads?
the guy who's sawing wood outside, there's a place where Lucy can stand, and Charles can be at a window sometimes, and she would stand there every day.
Yeah.
And there was a guy with a wood shop there,
Okay.
and he would talk to her.
Really creepy.
And also he was obviously knew what she was up to, and it was dangerous to be friends with somebody in the prison. You know, I mean, this was a dangerous thing when she stood there, and you know, if made any acknowledgement of the window, but I think he knows. He's the old guy we know as the mender of roads. He's been, in other words, he's fully been sucked in. Remember, they brought him in, they showed him the nobility, and Madame Defarge said, "No, go home." And he lived up, but now they're centralizing. He's come to the big city, and he's a full-blown Jacques.
I feel as though little Lucy should make people like them.
So,
When little Lucy's talking to him.
is that just like is that just his title, or was that what he actually did?
I think that's what he did.
Okay.
That is his job. That's what he was out there. How he mended the roads, it didn't sound like very efficient,
Doesn't sound like a very
because he just doesn't have much but like a couple of hand tools and rocks. Maybe he puts
just
rocks
put, like,
into the
stones
hole.
back into
Oh,
where
oh,
they-
fun fact.
Yeah. Oh, yay.
Okay.
Hey.
So I was looking up does the Bastille, because I don't think it doesn't still stand for 5,000.
Mhm.
And it was dismantled by the people after the revolution, and also the roads. So instead of just throwing away everything, they actually improvised and used the Bastille, the foundations, even the brick walls. They used it on the streets. Actually.
Okay.
And there are houses, not houses, but they're public buildings that have the foundation. It's really cool.
Very cool. They did this in ancient Greece too. When things were falling apart, a lot of the stones from the monuments and the temples they would just reuse. Because why cut new stones if you have perfectly good stone? Okay, so here's what I want to talk about for the rest of the time. Lucy
it's on
seems
backwards.
very weak. Yeah.
It's on backwards.
It's his special COVID mask.
It's his special.
It's actually for napping.
It's the super version that keeps you really safe.
You can't get it through your ears.
What if somebody sneezes on the back of your head?
He's gonna die.
I'm probably gonna die.
Okay,
You just
so
need 2 hoods. You need one for the back.
Lucy.
Like 2 sweatshirts.
Oh man, I have lost control.
Okay, go
You
ahead.
know,
Just so
what were we talking about? Losing control of things and lighting the fire, and it
Yeah.
just goes, and you can't control it anymore. Lucy has seemed like we'll call it a weak sort. Does she seem to behave in a weak way during that time in France? We don't see a lot of her, but we did see this. She goes out every day, no matter what the weather, and stands there,
What if it's like
knowing that he only
hurricane,
sees.
snow,
She still
fire,
Yes.
everything's blowing up.
Yes.
France is not
Like
a
some
hurricane,
comets
so.
come down.
Does that seem weak?
Sounds
No.
strong.
No,
So all of her other
the
behavior
mender of Rome
doesn't really
also,
seem
I think.
No,
It just
it
doesn't seem
doesn't.
really practical.
That's like the only strong thing that
Well,
she
but-
does.
Like, I'm gonna stand outside. in
Well,
middle of this
but it's the only
140
contact she can have with him,
Strong.
and what's more, it might be the
That's
only
something
thing
to
getting her husband through it. Because if he comes and he knows, everyone wants to see Tina. Don't look at her. Oh, you don't think it's Tina?
No, not
Oh, okay.
She's like, don't.
It's like, don't.
Don't make eye contact.
Because we all want to see if she'll say something stupid. Okay, she's probably past that by now.
I can't wait till I get blindfolded.
She seems to have a strength, and she shares the strength with her husband. Like I said, maybe the only thing keeping him
He's
lucid
kind of-
and sane in prison is the knowledge that at any given day he might be able to see her and their daughter, and she knows that, and she gives it to him. But I noticed someone else that, like, we talked about antithesis last week, okay, about characters that are match sets, not match sets exactly, but that seem to come in a pair. Obviously Charles Darnay and Sidney Carton, because they look alike. And we have Jerry and Little Jerry, and we have, Monsieur Defarge and Mr. Lorry, who were both employed by Dr. Manette. But I noticed one. Look at Dr. Manette in England versus Dr. Manette in France.
They're different.
Dr.
people,
Manette in
obviously.
France is more able.
Yeah.
He's got it together. He is, first of all, the hero. But he walks back and forth through that destruction every day with the dead bodies, and he knows his son-in-law is on the line, and he just keeps his calm and he's cool. Who advises them what to do, when he finally does get let out? Dr. Manette, like, this is what we should do. This is, Lucy, this is where you should go, and you can see him. I will arrange this. Yes, Thomas?
I also thought it was interesting. There's maybe a little bit of antithesis between Mr. Darnay and Mr. Manette when they're in the prison. Like, they're both like when Charles is in the prison, obviously he's got his wife and his kid there, and Dr. Manette didn't, but like every day he kind of imagined how Lucy was growing up, and yeah.
Yes, that's a very good point. They're both having a similar experience, but Manette having been forgotten, but still that same anguish of knowing what's going on outside the walls while you're trapped in there. But Darnay, hopeful, which I get the impression that at some point Dr. Manette gave up. He lost his mind pretty much. There was no reason for him to believe he was ever going to get out. We never find out how he was freed. I don't think that anywhere in the book they tell us how Dr. Manette ended up getting freed after 18 years.
Maybe they just thought since he had completely lost his mind that they should just take pity on him.
Maybe instead of
Just take pity out of
feeding
it.
him.
You're insane now. You
Just
can
in case he's like he was like thinking to himself or whatever.
Yes.
Just continually.
Yes.
He probably had fear that he would turn into what Dr. Manette had done.
I'm sure, because remember when he first got there, he was pacing the cell, and he was remembering, and he was thinking of years and years and years of pacing one cell. But yeah, so Dr. Manette, who was completely broken. I mean, obviously not completely because he was savable, but he seemed to be a completely broken man with no ability to care for himself, no touch with reality, and then even the times on their honeymoon when he goes back to making shoes, when the shadow would pass over him, because he's had something remind him of his time. He's like transformed into this dynamo in France who is caring for everyone else, arranging things. So here's my question. What gives Dr. Manette the ability to champion Charles Darnay and be the strength of Lucy now, when Lucy has had to be his strength?
Maybe knowing what his wife, remembering the times he thought about what his wife was probably going through, or not being in the situation anymore and being able to do something about it.
Maybe
Okay.
He doesn't want Charles to break like he did.
Okay.
He doesn't want Lucy to suffer the second time. She doesn't want Lucy to go through losing her husband after she thought she lost her father.
Or how his
maybe
wife
he's happy that Charles Darnay is in this cell and he was the third person that voted him. That is my conspiracy theory.
Ooh, conspiracy theorist. But all except for Thomas's, your other answers are basically saying the damage that was done to him is the source of his strength now. He would not be that strong man if he hadn't been abused and weak once upon a time. His weakness is now his strength, which I just thought was interesting because, Scripture, it doesn't talk about our weakness is God's strength. God uses us in our weakness. When I am weak, then I am strong. And Dr. Manette was weak, and it's not in spite of, it's because of the very events that made him weak that he is now strong. It's because of what he suffered that now he's celebrated. Like he's the survivor. He's the prison survivor. He's the poster child of how evil the old regime is. That they do this to nice men like Dr. Manette. And without suffering what he suffered, he wouldn't have the power that he has. And I just thought that was interesting because none of us have been in prison for 18 years. But we all have things that are hard. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes the very hard thing that you go through creates the strength. But you don't know it until hindsight. You don't know it until it. And I don't expect any of us, including me, to go through something hard and say, yes, but just imagine how strong and great I'm going to be when I get through this. But it's true. They say that people make the best counselors for, I don't know, like in a battered women's shelter or something like that. First thing, if they went through that. Do you know what I mean? Or if somebody's fighting cancer, like cancer survivors are good because they know how you feel.
Yeah.
Dr. Manette knows how Charles Darnay feels. He knows. And he's got a position of authority and power simply because he is the sufferer. He's the sufferer who becomes the conqueror. Jesus is the sufferer who is the conqueror in and through his sufferings. I just thought that was very cool. Okay, here's what I would like you to do. Oh, yes, Thomas.
I just got blinded by Raven's pants. Like, there was like a beam of light that shot of his pants. And I was like, my eyes.
The glory of Raymond's pants.
So
blinded you.
So now I am the sufferer and will be very strong when anybody else gets
Blinded by Raymond's pants. I'm glad. I feel like that's a very small segment of society that you're going to be able to minister to through that event, but I'm so happy they will have you.
Me too. Me too.
Okay. You do not come here next week.
What?
Because
too.
You know what? Then you could just like set up a little tent in the Olsons' yard.
Yeah.
The Olsons will come and you'll all just be looking in the windows. No, have a lovely Thanksgiving. What I would like you to do is finish A Tale of Two Cities, and here's what we're going to do. We are going to write a paper. No, calm down. You're not going to write it over Thanksgiving break because I want you to wait until we're done with our discussion. But I want you to start taking notes on it, and here's the direction I want you to take notes on. I want you to just get out a piece of paper and just make notes of character antitheses that you see. Like Dr. Manette, okay, like characters that seem to play off of each other. Do you know what I mean? Characters that might have a dramatic scene together, hint, hint, that you might be reading, that some of you have already read, that you might play them off of each other. Characters who change, okay? Dr. Manette. Characters who have an internal, a different inside than an outside, like Sidney Carton. There's another character that changes throughout the book. Anything you see where we see two things playing off of each other that are kind of matched sets or perhaps opposites, and just jot them down and a few notes about where you see that playing out. Okay? So I think you're going to have a lot of them. By the way, I'm not going to ask you to write a paper in which you include all of them, but I want you to come back and I want to talk about sets of characters and sets of circumstances and changes that we see in characters. And then after that, then we'll use your notes from that and the discussion from your notes to do a paper between Thanksgiving and Christmas on that, okay? And if you don't have a copy of Frankenstein, go ahead and get one, because after Thanksgiving we're only going to spend 2 weeks on it, so we will finish it before Christmas.
Which version?
It's not.
Which version?
I don't care.
Okay, because
There's a 1812 and an 1808 or something like that.
Version is like this.
No, well, it depends if it's got notes. You know, if it's got explanatory notes or something. I've got one Dover one that's really skinny, and then I got some from the library because I wanted to read some of the essays and notes, and they're thick because they've got all these pictures, and it doesn't matter. If you just get Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, not abridged, you're good, okay? But we're not going to read that yet. So basically, just making a chart of different antitheses that you see, and finishing the book. And other than that, eat your turkey. Have a lovely time.
How dare
You already ate the turkey?
Ham is my favorite.
Ham and turkey.
I love
Okay,
ham.
so french fries
I-
and steak.
We're not big
It's
turkey
kind of
eaters.
dry.
Thank you so
but
much,
I really.
though.
I don't like
Especially
pumpkin
when
pie.
I don't really.
Mine's
not
just
What?
Yeah, I want
You
pecan.
have like one bite
No.
of pecan, but then
Oh
it's
no,
just
I
like-
could eat a lot of pecan pie.
Raymond-
I don't even understand what too sweet means.
I could eat the entire.
Okay.
That's
I
not,
like
those are
ice
meaningless
cream, but
words.
not like
This is
really, really
nonsense.
sweet.
Okay,
That-
goodbye.
that's the same
Alondra,
way with,
Adriana,
like-
Tina, I will turn this
Oh, yeah.
off for you. Have a good Thanksgiving.
Bye.
Bye.